And now that we know that not only did Paul not have an issue with women in ministry, but he nominated and praised them for it, let's talk about 1 Corinthians 14. And I'm going to give you a history lesson for this one because I know you don't know it. 214 BCE, Carthaginian general Hannibal decimated the Roman army in the Second Punic War. 50 to 70,000 soldiers were killed in one war. It left Rome with a series of problems. They were broke, they needed a new army, and now they had a bunch of really wealthy women who collected the money from their dead husbands. So what they did was they passed what was called the Opium Law, which restricted how much money a woman could have, what kind of clothes she could wear. She couldn't be extravagant, if she could ride in a carriage except for special occasions. And they did end up raising money, raising a new army, and they did win the war. But even after the war, they didn't repeal the law. So in 195 BC, the women were so upset about their wealth being regulated, but men's weren't. They rioted in the streets. And a politician during that time that did not want to repeal the law because he wanted to uphold patriarchal Roman standards was named Cato the Elder. And he gave a very famous speech to the women in the streets saying, shouldn't you be at home? This isn't your place. Why don't you go ask your husbands? Women are to be silent in the public space. This was recorded by a historian named Livy, who was a very, very famous celebrity writer of his time. He wrote the history of Rome, which is one of the most famous historical pieces of that time. Paul would have heard this speech, he would have known it, and one of the tools that Paul uses throughout Corinthians, he uses it in chapter 6, chapter 7, chapter 10, is he will quote a Gentile teaching or a common law or a tradition, and then he will subvert it and change it for the Christian body. He uses this when he says everything is permissible for me, and then he says but not everything is beneficial, or when he says the food is for the stomach and the stomach for food, and then he corrects it to show Christians how to live. The interesting thing about 1 Corinthians 14 is it is almost a direct quote from Livy's recording of Cato's speech. So let me read it how it is annotated. So first is the quote, and then the subversion. Women should remain silent in churches. They are not allowed to speak, but must be in submission as the law says. If they want to inquire about something, they should ask their own husbands at home. A direct quote from Cato. For it is disgraceful for a woman to speak in the church. What? Did the word of God originate with you, or are you the only people it has reached? If anybody thinks he is a prophet or spiritually gifted, let him acknowledge that what I am writing to you is the Lord's command. Paul was not telling women to shut up. He was telling men like you to stop telling us to shut up, because why would the man who nominated female church deacons have an issue with women speaking in the church? He wouldn't. You also seem to forget that from the very beginning, Genesis claims that both male and female is the image of God. Women are not some niche in the human race. We are half the race, and we are equal under God. So start acting like it, because it doesn't sound like you've read the Bible, much less studied it. It sounds like you've given the good gok 3,000 to any genocidal gospel coming from a patriarchal pulpit, because it backs up what you worship in yourself.